listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your host, Marina Buksov, and I'm a functional medicine pharmacist in New York. I'm also a clinical herbalist and an integrative health coach specializing in mindfulness and empowerment. I'm on a mission to transform the way we approach healthcare by bridging the wisdom of traditional medicine with modern practice. And in this podcast, I will be highlighting guests who do just that. I'm constantly inspired by them, and I know you will be as well. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have with me a very, very special guest. I know I say that all the time, but his name is Reed Davis, and you'll see what I mean in a second. He's a double board certified holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist, is globally recognized expert in functional lab testing and holistic lifestyle medicine. As the visionary founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, Reed has pioneered the FDN certification course, which has empowered over 4,000 practitioners across 50 countries to take charge of their clients' health. With more than a decade of experience as health director at a Southern California wellness center, Reed has personally guided over 10,000 clients to optimal wellness, making him one of the most sought-after clinicians in his field. So I can tell, Reed, this is just such a wonderful feat. And I've actually interviewed a couple of other guests on this podcast that have been graduates of your program, one of which was a pharmacist. So I'll link to that in the show notes. But without further ado, welcome to the show, Reed.
Thanks so much. We love our pharmacists.
Yes. Thank you for the vote of confidence. So, Reed, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody here on the show. So, really, the first question is, how did you come to do this work? And we can go all the way back from the beginning and how you grew up, where you grew up, and how that led you to this field.
Oh, thanks very much. Well, I grew up in Canada, in Toronto, but I moved to the States when I was a young teenager. So I consider myself American. I'm a citizen. Living in San Diego, a beautiful place where I get to do this amazing work. I was always interested in service. And so actually back in the 90s, I was in environmental law and conservation, Marina, and I did well. I certainly was financially doing very well in that field. But the more you work with saving the air, birds, water, trees, bees, saving the planet, the more dead fish and birds you see. And I started wondering, well, that's fine, saving even pools of water and just different things. But what about people? So what about people, including me? And I was healthy, but I didn't want anything sneaking up on me either. You know, when a friend of mine's dad died, I was very close to, he was so-called perfectly healthy. And then he drops dead of a heart attack. And I knew then, this is 25 years ago, more, that, well, he wasn't, there must have been something wrong with him. And so, again, I was saving the planet, wanted to switch to people. And I happened to be taking my son to this chiropractic wellness center in Southern California. He was a high school athlete. Now, he ended up getting like 7 varsity letters in 4 different sports. But I ended up with a new career. Listening to the alternative doctors there explain how the body really worked was just a fascinating new area for me. And I had to become part of it. So I asked them for a job, mostly in marketing and business. And yet within just a few weeks, I was taking courses in anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, studying the body. I was running the office pretty much because I'm a good organizer. And then I also started interviewing every patient coming in the door just to orientate myself. And I'll wrap it up in a sec, but I'll just tell you that hearing every person walking in the door say that they've been to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 different practitioners and weren't better yet was I'll just say it was frustrating for me as well as them, and I considered it a big ripoff. Like, I'd never really been to a doctor, so I didn't know what Western medicine was like. I've been for some sports injuries, a couple motorcycle accidents, but that's it. And so it just changed my whole life to be able to work with people. And the one thing that really bothered me, another one thing, was so many of them said they'd been to their regular doctor, in quotes, and was told nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you. Your blood work looks normal. And so that was frustrating too. Now, I'll just sort of finish off the origination story by saying, thank God, I was in a perfect position at the time to study alternative lab work. The doctors there were going to seminar, learning stuff, and I just jumped on that like a duck on a June bug. I just loved the fact that I could look at these labs too. Again, saliva testing, urine testing, stool testing, blood testing, yeah. But these alternative labs were my edge, and became my profession and talent and skills. And everything I did for the next 10 years was run labs. I just started running labs on every single person that would pay for a lab. And it was remarkable. I'll just think of one quick funny thing I did. I was out riding my motorcycle one day, and I thought about these poor folks back at the office, so frustrated and caught in this cycle of trying this and trying that, and never really getting any satisfaction or very little. And I was upset, kind of PO'd, as you might say. And I said, I'm going to be the last person they need to see, which is very naive at the time, but that was 25 years ago. I spent the next 10 years running thousands of labs on thousands of people. I had really good mentorship. Matter of fact, one of the labs was in San Diego. I could go down there on weekends and talk to the scientists and the researchers and the doctors that were like me, going in there for learning. And but then I got to do a super amount of work. And again, with all that great mentorship, I made my own observations, Marina, about who got better and who didn't. And I tell you, I'm an organizer. I systematized it so that everybody walking in the door who said, I've been to 10 people already, I wasn't going to be number 11 out of 20. I was going to be the last guy. That was the goal, at least. And so after 10 years, they started making me teach others. And that's what I do now. I've been doing that since 2008. And so here we are.
Wow. Well, I love that mindset and the determination to be that last practitioner they'll need. And I think it's so interesting, Reed, because many of the people I interview and that I see get into the holistic space, the functional medicine space, they come at it from a clinical background. And it seems like you are coming from a research perspective and also from this environmentalism background, which I think the more that I do the clinical work, the more it makes me actually go towards more conservation and land stewardship and relationship and cleaning up that environment as much as possible, because that is indeed what is making the waters murky, so to speak. And these are the waters that we're all swimming in, right? And it's sort of like that swimming upstream analogy where we are all individuals, and functional medicine teaches us to treat us as such. And at the same time, the root causes on a global level are so similar. So I really respect all of the background that you shared with us and how that factors into your work probably. So I'm curious if you could share with us right off the bat some of these clinical pearls and observations about what you were noticing about who gets well and who doesn't.
Yeah, sure. And try to be succinct, because I think of all the things involved, and it's really, the human body and metabolism can be pretty complex. So you have to be able to explain it to the person sitting in front of you. Mrs. Smith, who she just knows she's overweight and tired, no libido and hair thinning and skin sagging and sort of all this stuff, joint pain, all this stuff. And fortunately, again, I had this access to these labs, and I became a guy that would just run labs. I can't help you unless I can look at the data. So I started running hormone testing. And within just a few months, I had run hundreds of hormone tests on these women coming in the office. Plus, I also had a health screening business, and I got a lot of new customers from that. So I was running these hormone tests, and it helped some people. And then I realized that, well, it doesn't help them all. What else is wrong? And so I'm going to give you this acronym, HIDDEN. That was after many years the commonality. It's never one thing. It's never one thing. Well, they're hormones. And then now they're catabolic, the bodies are breaking down, and their sex hormones go. So it's not just, when you say hormones, it's not just estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. It's the cortisol and the DHEA and these other markers. So you look at hormones, and the sex hormones are like the next domino to fall when you're in a catabolic state. So all that, it's easily measured. Easily take a kit, go home, put in your samples, send it off to the lab. It's cheap, it's easy, and I teach the interpretation of that in a way that relates to each individual. Explains why Mrs. Smith feels so crappy when someone else said there's nothing wrong with you, or it's just your thyroid or something. Here's your pills. So, but then the immune system's highly involved. So because that's the next domino to fall. If you're catabolic, your body's breaking down. That means your cortisol to DHA ratio are out of balance. Well, the next thing to fall, other than sex hormones, is the lining of the gut contains your main immunoglobulin. It's called secretory IgA. And in chronic stress, that's reduced. So your catabolic, hormones out of balance, immune system goes south. Then you get a dysbiosis. So now you got imbalance in good and bad flora, and that has its own cycle, or downward spiraling cycle, you must say. So it affects digestion. So you have to be able to look at that. And when it gets bad enough, and everyone listening to this probably knows about hyperpermeability, which comes from weakened mucosal barrier and dysbiosis, and eventually, I think the medical term is bigger, badder bugs. And so these bigger, better bugs infest and cause biofilms and all kinds of toxins, exudates, and things that further disrupt the systems. So not only do you have your catabolic imbalance, sex hormone problems, immune system deficiency, dysbiosis, and bigger, better bugs, now you've got leaky gut. So now you've got a detoxification problem because the liver gets congested. And if you go to a physician, they might look at certain enzymes or factors and say, you look fine, because it hasn't got that bad yet. It's not a true disease, but it's a dysfunction that's immeasurable. We use urinary bile acids, but it tells you now you got hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification. And that was enough for years and years. I would just help people do the measurements, give them the lifestyle requirements to reverse that, and I could go over those steps. But I also found out that energy production on a cellular level, the production of energy itself, and then the nervous system balance. I mean, if you work in a chiropractic office, which I did for 10 years, you learn about the sympathetic and parasympathetic, the autonomic nervous system. So I just went over HIDDEN testing. It spells hidden, makes it easy to remember. And that's our basic foundation for investigation. Hormone immunity. These are tests you can take home, do in the comfort of your house for the most part. And they're not expensive, and anyone can do it because there's no medical diagnosis. It's just what's dysfunctional. It's what's wrong with Mrs. Smith? What's really wrong? Not these labels that were given. And it was very. I laugh all the time because of how simple it was to a guy with a logical mind trying to get, never being able to diagnose and treat, never wanting to. And our patients coming in didn't want another darn diagnosis. They just wanted, what's really wrong with me? And I sorted out some things that I just mentioned, HIDD, and at least. You can add in oxidative stress. You can add in some other markers that are easy to get. But that was it. And it led to, if I could go on, you want me to just go on? So you got your, so the answer to your question is HIDDEN. That's the labs we run. And then what do you do? Now, I wasn't a physician. I couldn't get out a prescription. I wasn't a chiropractor either. And even though I did really good body work, I learned myofascial therapy and all this release techniques that a body worker could do. I couldn't adjust and things. So I started telling people who I'd see sometimes 2, even 3 times a week in the office, it's not what you do in the office that matters. It's what you go home and do. It's how you live your life. You got here because you didn't understand the laws of nature and are suffering the consequences of living outside of those tenets and principles that are inherent. Another big thing in an office like that is using the innate intelligence of the body and relying on it, and trusting it. So I told people to go home and eat right, go to bed on time, exercise, reduce stress in every way that it could be identified, and of course, take some supplements. And they were really important. So that spells DRESS: diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation. So the investigation is for the hidden stressors and dysfunctions and imbalances and what we call causal factors. And then the remedy is a self-directed with coaching, of course. Like you have to recommend the right diet and rest and exercise, which is age and physique appropriate. And then the biggest thing besides diet was stress reduction. And realizing that what you said a moment ago is so key. The environment itself is full of causal factors, stressors, whether it's mental, emotional, from the kind of crazy world we live in, and God forbid you watch the news. I watch too much myself because I'm fascinated by it. But so all the mental, emotional stressors, you could elevate that to psycho-spiritual, where people wandering around aimlessly with no purpose in life. That's stressful. And it's a hidden stress because you don't even know what's going on. And I've straightened people out or helped them. I'm not some master, but I have helped people discover their purpose in life. So you got the mental, when you say stress, people think, oh, I hate my job. My kids are bad. I have no money, whatever. There's worse than that, even just in the mind and emotions, but there's also the chemical stressors from that environment, as you astutely pointed out. One doctor friend of mine calls it a toxic soup that we're marinating in. If you want to interview Dr. Russell Jaffe, he's a great guy. He has his own lab and supplement company, but he's really smart. And he says that we're marinating in a toxic soup. So that's a different kind of, to me, that's just another stressor, just one more stressor. Add to that physical aches and pains from past traumas and injury, which is my thing. I have lots of sports related dysfunction in joints and areas like that, neck, both shoulders, left knee, right hip, low back, again, cervical, thoracic, I just have all this dysfunction. That's just another form of stress. At least that's how your body looks at it. It just doesn't really differentiate between getting yelled at and getting punched in the face. They're both just raise your cortisol, gets the blood, the flight, and that whole thing. So I kind of became an expert in stress and the lab work that would tell you the damage that's been done, because that gives you a foundation for taking the next steps. And I highly, people ask me, can you do this without lab work? You can, but the lab work just makes it so easy to understand what's really going on and to explain it to the client or patient, because they want to know, and they're not stupid. They don't like being told, oh, there's, you're just hypothyroid, and we don't know why your thyroid is like that, and just, but here's your medication. So they don't, for 25 years, I've experienced people who aren't satisfied with that. They need to be taught. And I think pharmacists are sitting in a perfect position to help Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones with their problem at a much deeper level than just, here, take this and you'll be on it for the rest of your life. That's good for certain businesses, but it doesn't help the person in the long run. It's actually counterproductive. Long answer.
100% agree, Reed. And you actually answered a couple of my follow-up questions. So why don't you walk us through, if you would, a person comes in, right, and wants help. What's your process as far as your evaluation? How many tests would you order right away? And what would you approach first? Which of those things do you address?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And the short answer is we run 5 labs on every person, because you really don't know, and you can't guess accurately enough of the time what the root cause is. And so what I quit using the word root cause, and I replaced it with another term I'll give you, but it was because there was never one root cause. And it was always multiple causal factors. And guess what? They're having an effect on each other in ways that aren't singly measurable in many cases. And I teach a course in lab work. I know a little bit about testing for things. And so multiple causal factors interacting with each other. How are you going to guess why they have this one symptom or two? And that's the common practice, is to guess that it sounds like thyroid. And that's a traditionally reliable cluster of symptoms. But if you just test the thyroid and go, yep, pat myself in the back, I found your problem, you're hypothyroid, and here's your medication, come back and we'll titrate the levels. To me, that was always treating the paper instead of the person. Well, why are you hypothyroid? I would say to the patients, did you ask why you're hypothyroid? Well, he said there's no real reason. We don't know why, or didn't give an answer. And I said, well, there is a reason. You just have to look far enough upstream to find it, and it's going to be multiple causes. So I just started calling it, instead of root cause, metabolic chaos. And that's a really good term to describe exactly what it's metabolic chaos, that, you've got the hormones and the immune system and digestion and detoxification, energy production, nervous system balance. That's, but at least knowing that and knowing what those labs are, to answer your question, we run a hormone test, an immune system, HIDDEN, through saliva tests for stress and hormones. We've added markers to that test to make it really even more reliable for looking into all the areas. You can do a saliva hormone test, which most people know about. We've added insulin and secretory IgA to that one test. So now it's giving us more insights into who is this person? Why do they feel like crap? We don't care that some doctor told them they're hypothyroid or irritable bowel or anything. It's like, well, here's what's going on, at least in that area. Now, when you also do another test, we call it the Metabolic Wellness Panel, and that is a look at dysbiosis and liver function, whether it's congested or not, and we look at oxidative stress. And we had another test. So, and that, by the way, is urine, and it's a dried urine, so it's very easy to collect at home and send into the lab. Costs nothing to ship it in, and things like that. And you can do it from multiple countries. That's why we're international. So you got the stress and hormone panel, which includes some other special markers besides the hormones: melatonin, secretory IgA, insulin. Now you've got this mucosal barrier metabolic wellness panel for liver dysbiosis, which points the finger at maldigestion and on and on. There's just so much. Remember, this is all these multiple causal factors interacting with each other. And when you add a finger stick test, which is a simple prick of the finger, it's called the mucosal barrier assessment. And we look at zonulin in the blood, the best way. And then we look at histamine and what's called diamine oxidase and the ratio of those two. Tells us an awful lot about the shape of your gut. What's it really look like in there? Without doing an endoscopy, just looking for, lesions or ulcers. And no, this is really just how, and you can catch things in early phases of dysfunction, the crypt hyperplasia and villus atrophy and the things that you'll see on this lab test. And combined with the other three, the only thing left to look at would be a microbiome test. So we use a really good one of those. Again, all these are collectible at home. And so that's 4 labs. And then I also check every single person for food sensitivities using a mediator release test. This is not IgG, IgM, or IgA. It's a cellular response test to foods that aren't helping you. Matter of fact, they're making you worse now. Will prevent healing. So you can't heal a gut if you keep eating foods you're sensitive to. So why not run them all at once? And do you know where I got that from, Marina? I used to, because I was scared and I didn't want our patients having to spend all their money at once. And so I would dole the tests out. We run this pan, come in. Oh yeah, this is really interesting. And you could even, apply some principles of healing even in that one area and people would feel better. But you weren't capturing it all. You could see that there's something else, So this HIDDEN and those 5 labs, I would run them all. And then I finally had a couple patients go, why the hell didn't you just run these all at once? Every time I come in here, you're running another lab. Why don't you just run it? And so I just started doing that and it just started working really good. So that's how I teach it. Run these 5 labs. And obviously there's a pocketbook problem there and it's not covered by insurance. These are, for God knows what reason, are still, actually we know the reason, but they're not covered by insurance because they're 20 years behind in what they cover. And even 20 years ago, they were 20 years behind. So now they're 40 years behind. And so, we run those labs and then we get into how we're going to fix this, which is all mostly lifestyle coaching. Again, you have to eat in a way that produces energy at the right rate, quality, quantity. Listen, I can go on. I mean, I'm a teacher, so I have to make sure I'm answering the question and get to the next one if you want here.
Yeah. How did you determine the order of how you're going to use your address solution, right? So is it different for every person? Do you find there's some that you have to address off the bat for best results?
Yeah, well, there's 2 things with that. One is looking at each person as an individual. And once you go through if you get the assessment done, you know what needs to be fixed. And not only will they feel better as they progress, but if you retest, you'll see the labs have actually improved. These areas of function have improved. And so there's a lot of accountability just in that. But the other thing is helping people with their weakest area first. So when I say that the remedy, simple as it sounds, is diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. And oh, by the way, this can fit very well with someone who does need medication. I'm not saying no one needs medication. There's people with some pretty serious stuff, and they could use both. They want to sort of get out of the woods with the medication, get the life preserver on. That can intervene in an effective and quick way, at least as far as symptoms go. But our answer, as just natural practitioners who aren't licensed to prescribe, we use the body's innate healing. The body will heal when you change the sort of signals to the body, to every area of it. And so diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation. The weakest area is pretty easy to assess initially, because some people go, well, I exercise 3 times a week. All right, leave that alone for now. Could be the wrong exercise, could be a lot of things. And I actually have people who over exercise, and then sleep. Oh, I sleep like a baby. Well, it's not work. Let's work on your diet, because that sucks. And even people who think they're eating right aren't. And so diet and stress reduction become huge, and supplements can bridge a gap as well, because food isn't very high quality. So there's not enough nutrition, vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, phytonutrients, trace elements, antioxidants, all the things that you need to get from food aren't there anymore in today's food. So supplementation could be important there, but also in the sort of self-treatment, in a way that there's you can stimulate and support the immune system, or digestion, or liver function, if you need to. So you could even put that aside for a minute, the supplements. You don't try to sell people a bunch of stuff. But getting the diet right, we use a system called metabolic typing, which really matches your genetic requirements in terms of 2 things. So the D is always a good place to start, even if they think they're eating right. And by the way, there's not much of a bigger epigenetic influence than diet. That's why this country that we live in is obese. We have, I don't know what percentage of kids are fat, but it's totally inappropriate to their genetics. They're not designed to be fat. They just end up being fat because of the crap they're putting in their bodies. And so we look at diet really seriously, and stress reduction, because that could be very much hidden as well. A lot of stressors just are hidden. Parasites, bacteria, funguses, viruses, food sensitive, these things you don't even know are stressing you out. And so if you're you take all those plus chronic, sympathetic dominance, fight, flight, and all the anxiety that comes with that. Those 2 areas, if you did nothing else, diet and stress reduction, including even for myself, I'm still going and getting, I did I overused, I went past the limitations of the normal physical abilities, with sports, jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai kickboxing and motorcycle riding and surfing and things like that. I wrecked a lot of my body. I literally damaged it. So now I have these chronic old issues, and I've been doing stem cells and PRP and A2M injection. They take your blood out and they spin it down and they shoot it back into all these joints. I've had at least a dozen or 15 stem cell treatments, neck and low back, and just both shoulder, all over the place. So that's just another stressor that I have to deal with. So stress reduction is that mental, emotional, which I'm not an expert in. I have my own way of dealing with that I think works for me. The psychospiritual, and that's really the area where mental, emotional, psychospiritual kind of come together. But the physical, sometimes you really need help. And then lastly, that chemical stress. My wife and I eat organic, only. We don't put, even we go to a restaurant, we tell them we're water snobs. We will only drink bottled water, glass bottled water, and on and on and on. So that's the chemical, environmental toxins that are so bad. They've found these chemicals, hundreds of them, on the top of Mount Everest in the snow, you name the metals that are in all the things, plastics and garbage, and so it's on the top of Mount Everest. You see studies on microplastics being in the brain, and that being normal. Don't you hate that word normal?
Yeah, I really do. I was going to say earlier with the labs that we look for optimal ranges, not normal ranges. Like that's what hopefully the doctors, the conventional doctors and the insurances will start to look at once they catch up. But I'm actually going to ask you a question because of your unique background and what you just mentioned about the collective stressors that we all share. What do you think we can start doing either on a grassroots level or an individual level, some of which you mentioned, like eating organics and avoiding plastic, but even maybe on a collective level, what can we do to lessen some of these stressors on ourselves?
Uh, my mind goes to what I do, which is supporting local organic farmers, and even to the point where, I'm looking at investing in converting natural or standard farming into organic. It takes 3 years to convert even something like a 500-acre farm, which is tiny. It takes 3 years to convert it from standard, chemical fertilizers and all this stuff and pesticides and herbicides and rodenticides and like human side is what I call it. And it takes 3 years to convert a field. So you can support those kind of movements and things just by going to your local organic. We go on Saturday mornings to our local farmers market. But on a bigger scale, I support the National Federation for Health, which has been around for 50 years. Being kind of an antagonist, they're a nonprofit to big Western medicine. The Maha movement in America right now is big, and I support holding companies liable for the damage they're doing on purpose that they know about. I mean, if something's accidental, we didn't know. But when you do know and you put it in food anyway, that's a crime against humanity, in my opinion. So when you ask a question like that, you're opening up a can of worms that you need an army of people, each one kind of working in their area of specialty. With my law background, I often think about working in that area. And I also bought land, and I raise my own vegetables to some extent, not all of them, a few, and they're just as delicious as you could be. It's like when I grew up in Canada as a kid, both my grandfathers grew food to eat, like to put on the table. And we would just rinse it off in rainwater and eat it. And that way you're getting all what I call the good dirt. The good dirt and the vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and things. So there's a lot you could do. The problem is convenience, and because it's not convenient, it takes effort and a mindset. And we just work on one person at a time where I come from.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And thank you so much for sharing those tips with us. Now, I want to also ask you about sustainability. So you mentioned like the drug model, obviously chronic disease, you have to be on an XYZ drug, and then you have to add on therapy for side effects and other things and tolerance reasons. And when you do your approach, you may have to also take some supplements to bridge the gaps that we talked about. So, what's the ultimate goal, and what have you noticed around somebody needing to be on drugs or supplements for a prolonged period of time? Or is it possible to wean off everything?
It depends on the person and what their situation is. The goal might be to have the innate intelligence to take over, to be so healthy that you don't need any of that stuff. You just need what humans need to be fully functional, at the cellular, tissue, organ system level. Like, so there's principles involved, and I could boil it down to coach up function in the areas that we mentioned and every other area, on a cellular, tissue, organ system level, to coach up function. So we do some measurements, look at what's dysfunctional, and then you feed people and the right things and remove the negative influences or signaling, which are almost unavoidable in some cases. But you do that while you coach down the contributors to metabolic chaos, and that is the stuff that you can avoid. I recommend people go to ewg.org, Environmental Working Group. It's ewg.org. That will tell you, it changes every year. They go the clean 15 foods, the dirty dozen, the most toxic foods. And they have on there all kinds of information about household cleaning products and personal care products. And so that you can stop putting stuff on your skin that's bad for you. If you wouldn't eat it, why would you put it on your skin? Because it's going to absorb right into your bloodstream. I have great stories about that. What just gets into our bodies through the skin alone is, interesting and maybe atrocious. So you coach up function, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation, while you reduce contributors to metabolic chaos, known, and then some we might have to look for. But you never stop looking. So I liken myself sometimes to that old Detective Columbo. I don't know if you ever watched a Columbo.
Yes, I have actually.
That guy was like me. He was disheveled and kind of goofy, but he was smart, and he always got his man. He never quit. You remember he used to say, "I've got one more question, Mrs. Smith,"
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we are. It's like look for those hidden stressors.
Well, I've actually got one more question for you, Reed. How was FDN born? And if you could also talk a little bit about the business model that either you have adopted that was really successful, or what you teach your FDN students.
Sure. So after about 10 years of doing FDN, I didn't call it that. I was a personal trainer, certified nutritionist, and all these other things. And I was just running lab work. So I didn't have a name for it, but it was working. Our clinic got known for that. And I'd be out lecturing. I did a lot of lecturing in public. And people would say, why aren't you teaching other practitioners how to do this? This is rare. And I just didn't think about it. And one day, one of the lab directors, really smart guy, Dr. Simmons, called me and goes, "Who the hell are you?" I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, well, he goes, "You're like the number one busiest person on the planet. No one orders the number of labs you do. You run more than our best customer, and he has 5 doctors working for him. So whatever you're doing, you should be teaching it." So I thought about that, and I saw some other people going into teaching that I knew weren't that qualified. They didn't have the experience. So I put together a class in 2008, and I taught what I was doing. Just here's what I do. And those people wouldn't go away. So I started teaching, and then everybody kind of goes into this alumni group, which is a community now, so now we have the groundswell of peer support. So it's not just what I teach, it's what we find out in the meantime. And so that keeps everything we do fresh and up to date. And I mean, even as of today, now I have an education director. I have about 50 people all over the world helping teach, mentoring, and we have lots of programs and things for our grads. So that's the state. That's how FDN. I just called it that when I made it up. Functional Diagnostic Nutrition for my first class ever, and it's stuck. I mean, it just sort of can't get rid of it now. But so FDN, we're affectionately called FDNers all over the world, and especially U.S., Canada. And what was the other part of the question? It was like, the business model.
Yeah,
So I was always fee for service. I never took insurance. I did a lot of I learned how to do the billing for the company early because I kind of had to. I wanted to see where the money was. but all of my services have always been fee for service. So that means people will pay you in an arm's length transaction, no one under any duress, to pay me for my service, which is to run labs, give them a protocol that works for them, that's totally customized, and then you can add coaching to that, which all of it elevates your ability to raise your revenue stream, and there are multiple revenue streams available in that model. So, but it's fee for service. So I never went into a lawyer's office and told them what's going on, that they didn't say, write me a check for $5,000 and I'll represent you. That's fee for service. So people talk to us and we say, you can pay me and I'll run these labs. So it's fee for service. And it's a great model. And even part-timers are doing very, very well for themselves. And it's kind of a cash practice, what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I won't say it's lucrative unless you consider that for your time involved, like you want more than just financial freedom. Everyone wants financial freedom. To me, that's just having more money than what your bills add up to. And you can easily do that and gain back your time. Work your own hours. Work from anywhere in the world that has an internet connection, because there's no brick and mortar required. And the freedom of time and geography are important, but your own health freedom, because you work on yourself. You're supposed to walk the talk to some degree. Everyone has problems, but you get health freedom, financial freedom if you charge right and know how to manage your customers. If you get results and get referrals, you're going to do well. And so, but then the freedom of knowing you're getting up every day in the world and doing some good in it is probably the highest level. And that's what I share with my wife, is we know we're doing good work, and there's a lot of joy and feeling blessed around that.
Yeah, beautiful. And speaking of time, is there a minimum amount of time that you recommend clients work with you or any other FDNer to see those results from the DRESS protocol?
Well, you can get relief. Relief comes pretty quickly, maybe just a couple weeks. If they're not feeling a whole lot better in 3 weeks, you got to reassess. But everyone feels better when they just start working on these things, and they taking control, and they know they're working on real stuff that's not some made up, label. And it's real dysfunction, and so they always feel better quickly. But the minimum is 90 days is what I recommend. It's a bite-sized piece of time. You get 90 days. Days are nice little chunks, but you string 90 days of good behavior together, and you're gonna see some major changes. Sometimes complete resolution, depending on what their complaints were. The other thing I'll say about this business aspect is knowing how to onboard the right people. I'm using the term onboarding. I really don't know where I got it from. It's kind of an interview where you're interviewing them to see if they would, number one, can you help them? And number two, do you want to? Is this somebody who would go into that arm's length transaction that you would want to take fees from to help them? So I have a very, very well thought out and developed onboarding process that I teach.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, all of that makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing those pearls and all your wisdom today, Reed. If you have just one more minute, I'd love to do a rapid fire round of questions with you.
Okay, sure.
All right, so question one, what's the number one way somebody can improve their quality of life right now?
Get up in the morning and be grateful for something. And we didn't practice it. That's just my automatic answer. I get up every day and thank God for the day. I'm one of the lucky ones. And again, to be able to do important work. So it sounds corny, I know, to some people, but gratitude is. I have a friend. Have you interviewed Ben Azadi?
Not yet.
Right,
I'll write it down.
Ben Azadi, and your listeners could look him up. He's a graduate of my program, and he calls it vitamin G. He's one of those guys out there really promoting the idea of your point of view. Is the cup half empty or half full? Successful people, most of them, look at the world as being pretty good, and no victimization. So that point of view would be my number one thing. You said rapid fire, but
Yeah.
I don't really work that way.
Love it, Reed. Question 2 is, what do you wish more people knew about to empower their health journey?
Well, look to rule number 1, but I would say education, self-control, understanding consequences are automatic and natural, and you can't circumvent them. You cannot. Stephen Covey, one of my heroes and mentors, said, you can't change the foundations. You can only crash upon them. You will break yourself you will never break the principles of nature successfully. You will break yourself upon those. So we use the natural principles in the innate healing intelligence. I wish they all knew that.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, we are the product of our culture. And so we're living in this culture of unwellness, right? And the environment that we talked about. And that is, a lot of it comes down to what is, like you said, convenient, right? And what everybody else is doing and what is the norm, but that's not the optimal thing for the individual. So 100% agree with you there. Last question. What's something fun, like a fun fact about yourself, or even something surprising that many people may not know about you?
Most people know I ride a motorcycle. I've had a collection of motorcycles since I was about 17. That's over 50 years ago. But I ride and I get out and I get some of my best ideas and thoughts, and I plan a yearly trip on the bike every year and things like that. I don't know if that's fun. I also drive I call it the tractor. I'm really good at it. So I have this, it's called the Bobcat front end loader with all the attachments and things. And so I have property and I move big rocks and dig holes and build walls and fun stuff. Built a pond, like a big natural pond. And for the first time, I actually saw an egret, big white bird, come. Never been around here before. It came because of that pond I built. So I try to go outside and have fun every day.
Yeah,
So I start so early.
Those are definitely very fun facts. Thank you for sharing those, Reed. And lastly, can you please share with our audience how they could learn more about you, about FDN, and any other work you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So, FDN is a very cool thing. We call it FDN training. So fdntraining.com/holistic pharmacy would be a good place to go. We have very popular webinar there for you for free called Step-by-Step System to Overcome Your Health Issues, something like that. So fdntraining.com/holistic pharmacy, please.
All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for coming on here and sharing everything that you shared with us today. And I really hope our listeners are just as transformed by this interview as I was. I was even taking notes. So thank you again for coming on, and I look forward to maybe having you on another time. Take care.
My pleasure. Anytime you want to dive into any one of those things, because we got the 60,000 foot view today, but if your listeners would like it, I'd be happy to do it. And thank you very much. You're doing amazing work. I hope you just keep at it because it's much needed.
Thank you, Reed. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Take care, Marina.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast, and I truly hope you enjoyed the show. If you learned something useful in this episode, please consider giving the show a 5-star rating and a sincere review so that more people can find it, or share it with a friend directly. To get in touch with me, you can find me on social media by looking up my name, Marina Buksov, or email me at marina@rawfork.com. Take good care and see you soon.